Welcome back to the channel. My name is Fraser and today I'm going to take you through the Telos Chillum Snowboard from Telos, as you might expect. We're going to have a look at the tech specs, how it performed and whether it might be the right board for you. So let's get into it. Founded by industry veterans, Telos is not just another new kid on the block. In fact, the founders have literally decades of experience in some of the biggest names in snowboarding. They founded this new brand with the aim to bring sustainable building practices in at an affordable price point, all whilst making innovative and performance-focused shapes. Sounds too good to be true? Maybe it is. Let's find out. Obviously, today we're focusing on the Chillum, which is their all-mountain freestyle option. A true twin, meaning if you cut it down the middle, it would be exactly the same top and bottom, and this means it rides exactly the same forward as it does backwards. The board features their dual camber profile, which essentially means it's a predominantly camber profile, but with a very mild rocker between the feet, and then there's a mild lift towards the tip and tail. What this does is retain some of the precision and pop of camber, but take off a little bit of that bite. In terms of sizing, the board comes in a 146, 149, 152, 155 or a 159, and I actually went for the 152, which is 3 or 4 centimeters shorter than my normal or mountain size. Now, the reason for this is that they're more generous than normal with their weight range, but also the waist width is slightly bigger, meaning it can accommodate my slightly bigger boot size without me running the risk of having toe or heel drag. It isn't quite volume shifted in the same sense that something like the Ride Warpig is, but it's certainly got that little bit of extra chunk so that you can size down if you would like to. So that's pretty much all you need to know from the tech specs point of view. Let's move over and take a closer look at the board. In terms of construction, it is built with a poplar and X-wood core, which has carbon stringers for extra pop and torsional flex. It also has a die-cut black sintered PTEX 4000 base, which is a fancy way of saying it has a sintered base. It has polyurethane sidewalls with a full metal edge wrap. And as you can see, it's got a particularly nice top sheet with one of the best looking graphics I've seen this season. And the fact that it's not glossy and it's matte is also better for the environment because you're not using the glossy chemical crap that you normally need. I paired it up with the Burton Genesis step-on bindings and my Burton Ion step-on boots. I also tried it with my Union Strata bindings, and I'll be reviewing those shortly too. So I'll get this out the way straight off the bat. I was a big fan of this board. I didn't really know what to expect, having never tested anything from Telos before, but actually as soon as I got it out the box, you could tell that this thing was quality. Now, the first thing you're gonna notice is how light it feels. I didn't weigh it, so this is just my opinion, but it certainly feels lighter than my other boards of similar lengths. What you'll also notice is how blurmin' beautiful this top sheet is. And I know we're supposed to pretend that how a board looks makes no bearing on your purchase decision, but obviously it does, and this thing looks great. Essentially, you've got a majority camber profile. Somewhere in the middle here, you're gonna see a very small amount of rocker. Nothing major, it's not something like the skate banana where you're rocking around in the middle, but it's just enough to take away some of that bite from the camber. And then from there, you might be able to see, but there's camber again underfoot, and then at the end, there's a lift in the tip and tail to take out some of that sting and the risk of catching your edge. What this did was ride really nicely. The camber predominant profile has managed to retain quite a lot of the pop, but I wasn't catching an edge anything like I was on things like the Burton Custom X, and you could get away with being a bit tired and a bit lazy towards the end of the day. In terms of the flex, I've obviously said, but it's rated a 7 out of 10. I would agree it's a medium stiff board, 6 or a 7, and that's usually where I like to ride my all-mountain boards. This also means in terms of pop that it's got plenty. The Tri-X glass and the carbon stringers help with that. What I would say is it does take a little bit more preload than some softer boards, but once you do get that preload and get the tail right under your body weight, you're gonna get a really nice spring out of those ollies. In terms of jumps, I took it from small right up to XL jump lines, and it held its own really nicely. What I would say is on the XL line, I did feel a little bit more squirrely. Partly maybe due to the fact that I'd sized down to a 152 when I'm normally riding a 155 or 156. And it was perfectly capable even then, but I would probably want a little bit more stability and a little bit more edge hold if I was only taking it through jumps of that size. In terms of speed, as you'd expect, it's nice and fast, thanks to the sintered base. And actually Telos, I'm gonna get that right eventually, but they send out all of their boards with a 1-ball J green bio wax. So rather than just having a thin factory wax, these boards are ready to ride. And even when it was slightly dry after a few days, it was still nice and fast. In terms of butterability or butters, this did surprise me. So the blunted tips and a nice wide tip and tail made for a really nice platform for buttering. And the main thing is once you do get dialed in, once you get them locked in, they do hold really well. And this was the same on features and rails as well. It did take a little bit more work getting into those presses and getting into butters than something like the Battalion Disaster, but you are rewarded for it once you get there. One thing that did surprise me was that on the days I was testing, we got an unexpected powder stash, and this thing held up way better than it had any right to as an all-mountain freestyle board. Now, can it compare with a pure powder board? Of course it can't, but compared to my other all-mountain boards like the Capita DOA, it did a much better job at riding powder. And I think that's probably because of the increased waist width and quite wide nose and tail. In terms of turns and carving, this thing held an edge and carved really well. It does prefer to be carving than flat basing, and that's the same with most camber dominant profiles. So if you're going fast and flat basing, you are going to get a bit squirrely, but that's not much of a problem even then. And actually, turn initiation was better than I expected. When it comes to the downsides, the first one has got to be that unfortunately, whilst Telos have tried to keep the price down, it's still not a particularly cheap board. Do I think it's worth the asking price? Probably, but if you're looking for a bargain or you're looking for a massively discounted board, which you might find with some of the bigger brands, then this isn't it. The other thing to note is that new riders are often hesitant to go with a lesser known brand, and they're more likely to go with something like Burton or Capita. Now, if you are able to take that leap of faith and give a smaller brand a go, I always recommend it because it gives you a unique board and a unique perspective, and you're not just riding the same board as 1,000 other people on the slopes. The other thing is that this is relatively stiff for a middle of the road or mountain board, and if you're a light rider or a brand new rider, you might want to opt for something a little more forgiving. I also found that it wasn't quite as comfortable when flat basing, and you did have to keep a little bit of an eye on what your edges were doing, but with a camber dominant profile, that's pretty much always the case. I would recommend this board for dynamic or mountain park riders who are looking for a board that's nice and stable, a little bit wider, you can downsize it slightly, and you can ride it pretty much anywhere. If you like the sound of this brand, but this is maybe on the stiff side for you, then it's worth checking out the Telos Legend, which is a slightly softer and more forgiving option. I think that's pretty much it for one day. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll drop the link to the board in the description. And if you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe so we can see you in the next one.